My guest today is Sia Twani. Meet the man who, like a giraffe, stuck his neck out for what he believed. Like Nelson Mandela, Sia was imprisoned for making a stand against injustice in South Africa. He is a resilience and mental toughness motivational speaker who speaks in schools and businesses across the country. Sia is a motivational speaker on a mission to empower, educate and enthuse people, especially children and young people with resilience skills. With over 30 years' experience of speaking in the education sector, he is highly recommended by Ofsted and other authorities and can put his message across in an articulate manner that is accessible to all. So welcome, Sia, to the show. Lovely to have you here. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Madeleine, for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to it. I'm doing really, really well. All the better for seeing you, and thank you for the opportunity
You're
to interface
so
with your audience.
welcome. So because the show is called Unbroken, the very first question I ask everyone is, what does that word unbroken mean to you?
It means different things. We live in a broken world, broken, fragile humans who have a potential to inflict pain on others. The world is beautiful, actually. It's the people that mess it up with the actions and the behaviors and the words that can lead to broken-hearted people. I see myself not as a broken person. I see myself as a wounded healer because all of us who are, inverted commas, broken, are wounded healers. I use that word carefully because I refuse to accept that I'm a victim of apartheid. I am not a victim of apartheid. I'm a victor because victimhood is a choice.
Yeah.
Feeling sorry for oneself and what happened in the past is a choice. Yeah, some people like to throw a self-pity party. Oh, feel sorry for me, still feel sorry for me. No, I made a choice not to be a victim. Yes, what happened to me, it did happen, but it doesn't define me. Does that answer your question?
That absolutely answers my question in the most beautiful way. I love the term wounded healers, and it really resonates with me so much. So you gave us a little bit of a clue because you spoke about apartheid. So I know you're in London now, but you were born in South Africa, and you were born into hardship, racism, inequality. What was life like for you when you were a young man?
Uh, People always ask me, how long did I spend in prison?
Hmm.
Basically, I was in prison for 4 years, but my whole life was an imprisonment because by the mere fact that I was born black, it determined where I would go to school,
Yeah.
which shop I would go to, which plane, which swimming pool, which friends I would have. So South Africa, because of apartheid, was divided into colored, white, Asian, and blacks. And black people were right at the bottom of the racist ladder or pyramid. So it was the Afrikaners, English, Japanese, etc., etc. So for a black person, we were right at the bottom, and it was made known that we are not just human beings. We're not humans at all. We're not humans at all. So, for example, when my dad was a paper boy.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so my father one day decided, son, I was about 10, I'm going to take you on a trip with me. You're going to help me deliver papers on white people's flats and houses.
Hmm.
I was excited. Wow. I'm going to town with my dad. So jump on the train, excited. We went to a number of block of flats in Cape Town, delivering the newspaper through the letterboxes or underneath the paper, underneath the door. My father happened to miss one of the houses. A little white boy who was old enough to be my dad's grandchild ran towards us and says, "Hey, you careful boy, you boy." And I was thinking, did he just call my dad a boy? So I floored him. I did a Mike Tyson, boom, on the floor. I did a Jackie Chan on him. And my father was so angry with me. And he walloped me. He walloped me. Do you know, Madeline, why I did that?
Would you get into trouble for beating this boy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. He would have gone to prison
Yeah.
for allowing me to defend his honor and his dignity.
And
So
kefir is a derogatory term, isn't it?
it's like a nigger word.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's like, hey, nigger boy. And
yeah.
I just thought, wow. So my father punished me for punishing the white kid who called him a boy. Because in South Africa, if you're a black person, you were never a child. You would die. You're never an adult. You die a child. So my mom was called a child girl. My father was called a boy or a garden boy.
Yes.
That was
So
my childhood.
even when you reach, the grand age of 80, 90, you're still a garden boy or a child girl.
Absolutely.
So
You
it's
would
almost like
die.
to keep you in your place, then, really, isn't it? The language that's used.
Yeah, yeah, it's derogatory, is to demean and dehumanize black people, to say that you're an eternal child. They even Afrikaners call black people pickaninnies, yeah, which comes from pygmies. You're a little person that does not exist. I define you and I tell you who you are.
But they couldn't do that to you, Sia, because you decided to fight for equality. And this is what I believe. I don't know the story of why it led you to prison. You can tell us about that.
Oh, of course, of course. At the age of 17, prior to 17, it was 1976, there were riots in South Africa. The South African racist government forced us to learn all the subjects in Afrikaans. And we refused because it was the language of the oppressor.
Yeah.
And so in 1976, I was only 13. We went on a huge march protesting against being not just oppressed, but now we are told that everything must be done in the language of the oppressor, English, maths, etc., etc. So that was 1976. Fast forward, 4 years later, I'm 17, and I was one of the student representative leaders, vocal about the injustice in South Africa, especially in education or just in life generally. So I got arrested with my two other comrades, my other two friends, and we were put at the back of a small called Galant car. Yeah, and we were handcuffed to the back of this car, which is illegal because in South Africa, you're not even allowed to put a live chicken or a goat or in the back. But we were stuffed together in the back of this little court gallant, and we were handcuffed to an interrogation room in Caledon Square in Cape Town, where we were tortured and brutalized, and my rib was broken as a result.
Yeah, they were very vicious with you, really, weren't they?
They were brutal. They were really brutal. The strange thing, because we're going to talk about forgiveness. Maybe I should hold fire because one of my torturers I met at the Desmond Tutu was officiating one of my friend's ordination, and one of my torturers was one of the deacons in the church.
This was after your imprisonment.
This is after, now this many years, maybe
So,
10, 15
so
years
he
after,
flipped his life around completely then, didn't he?
because the system used black people as police officers, as informers. And for example, I alluded to it earlier on, Desmond Tutu was celebrating the Eucharist of one of my friends' ordination. And I said to my wife, then I says, look who's behind Desmond. Says, who? I says, it's a man who tortured me as a black guy. He tortured me in prison. Actually, the black security branches were brutal than the Afrikaners. And the Afrikaners were worse, but they were brutal. And they would laugh, ha, 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 you terrorists, you think that you're going to have the upper hand? This is the white man's country. These are black people saying it. These are black people saying it.
But you
So,
got to a point where you could look beyond that and see that they were just victims of their society, their
absolutely.
conditioning, their corruption almost by their life.
Why? Absolutely. I got to the point of saying, see, if I hold grudges and bitterness, it's like cancer. It's like waiting. It's like Mandela says it so well. Forgiveness. Some people think that forgiveness is like, or resentment is like giving somebody the poison to drink and expect that person to die. Actually, it's me who's dying.
Yeah.
So it was on that Sunday when I saw this guy. It was a few years after I was released from prison. I actually literally went to Caledon Square to offer forgiveness to the white Mr. Speaker van Wyk, Coetzee and Van der Horven. Yeah, they were Afrikaner guys. They were brutal. I offered Mr. Swartz, who was the chief of the interrogation officers, and he spoke Xhosa actually fluently. So the others didn't want to know, hey, what praat van? What are you talking about? Mr. Swartz, who spoke my language fluently, took off his glasses and he cried. And I thought, I've done my job because I'm liberating myself.